Welcome to Transform and Transformational, a TeachBeyond podcast. I'm Kian.
And I'm Heather. We're here to explore what it means to be transformed in our own lives and how that overflows to living lives of transformational impact in our communities.
Today we are going to be talking with a TeachBeyond intern. So I'm wondering, Heather, have you ever done an internship?
Well, internships weren't as much a thing for education majors at the school I was going to. So, like the type of internship where you go and you find it on your own at a company, because the university program that I was in had field experiences and student teaching built into the coursework. So I was getting a lot of relevant hands-on experience throughout the semester, but didn't need to go and find another internship at another time. So I had summer jobs. I was nannying, working at a Christian camp, working at a nonprofit organization, but none of those were official internships. How about you? You were studying communications in college, right? So I'm assuming that you would have had internships.
Yes, I definitely had internships. I actually had 3 internships. I was an interdisciplinary studies major, which combined communications and art for my studies. So I had 3 internships, which is probably too many. I did an initial kind of real internship in an advertising agency between my junior and senior year, and that was one that I had to go out and look for and apply to a bunch of places.
Mhm.
Then the other 2 were during my senior year. In the fall, I got an internship through a friend. It was actually at a Christian school in Florida doing kind of the AV things, AV work. And then my final internship actually ended up getting me a real full-time job, and it was at Crossway, a Christian book publisher in Illinois.
Yeah, that's a lot, especially all packed into that final year before graduation, between that summer before graduating and then through the school year.
Yeah, they were great. I really enjoyed the internships. It's great to see what working a real job is like.
I had the chance to sit down with Chloe Powell and hear about her experience interning with Teach Beyond last summer. Kian, you and I both had an opportunity to meet Chloe as part of her internship, and it's been a few months since then, so it was neat to reconnect with her and hear her perspective looking back on that time as part of our Work and Calling series here. Chloe is in her second to last semester at the University of Northwestern St. Paul in St. Paul, Minnesota in the US.
Let's go to that conversation now.
Welcome to the podcast, Chloe.
Thanks for having me, Heather.
It's great to be together and having this conversation. Well, Chloe, you are a university student. I'd love for you to just fill us in on what you're studying in college, what your thoughts about the future might be, if you have any specifics. What does college life look like for you right now?
Yeah, so I am studying intercultural studies and nonprofit leadership at the University of Northwestern St. Paul. In the future, I would really like to work for a nonprofit that offers support or aid to those who are in need. What that looks like right now, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm open to whatever the Lord has in store for me. And so, yeah, it's a little bit about what I'm doing at school.
Yeah, snowy winters there in Minnesota in the US. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And as you're studying nonprofit leadership, as you're studying this field, I resonate so strongly with you that sometimes it's hard to see how we're going to use our major in the future, and
Mhm.
also, what a 5-year plan can look like. I don't know about you, but whenever I hear, oh, what's your 5-year plan or even 1 to 2 year plan, it can be overwhelming to try to think about what that looks like, wouldn't you say?
Oh, 100%. I get asked the question all the time, and I'm like, I don't know yet, but we'll see.
Yes.
We'll see what he has in store. So,
Yeah, right. There's a healthy balance of planning and thinking ahead and having a major that will lead towards career opportunities, but also recognizing that the Lord works in ways that we sometimes can't anticipate or plan, or, changes our direction. So it's healthy to keep those in balance. Well, I think it might be pretty obvious why then you pursued an internship with a nonprofit like Teach Beyond. But what was it, if we back it up further, what was it that prompted your desire to seek out an internship specifically in missions? And yeah, what are your thoughts on how interning with Teach Beyond might tie into what you're doing in the future?
yeah. So for my degree, we're actually required to have an internship that is some kind of intercultural experience. So originally, when I was planning out when I wanted to do it and where I wanted to do
Mhm.
it, I actually had different plans.
Hmm.
And so I planned to join other UNW students in Guatemala,
Hmm.
but something about it just didn't quite feel right. And I couldn't place it in that moment. But I actually ended up taking a class called Intercultural Teamwork. And one of our assignments was to interview someone who's a part of a multicultural team. And so I actually chose to interview a TeachBeyond member
Oh,
who used to teach at the charter school that I went to from kindergarten to my senior year. And I left that meeting intrigued, and I couldn't quite shake the feeling that I needed to inquire about a potential internship. So I did just that. And the doors just kept opening as we figured out all the logistics. And I ended up getting the position as the global office intern in the UK. So I really just hoped that through this internship, I would see kind of how a global nonprofit functioned, while also focusing on advancing the gospel message, and emphasizing the importance of being culturally aware as you're entering different cultural contexts. And much of what Teach Beyond is being focused on being a part of God's mission to transform lives and communities. And that's exactly what I hope to be a part of now and in the future. So it just made a lot of sense to pursue an internship with a missions organization like Teach Beyond.
so interesting how different connections from different seasons of life end up turning into an internship like this, or other opportunities that we have. So who knew that a teacher from your K-12 school would end up being the point of connection with a college internship? So that's great. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, just to ask the follow-up question here. I'm curious, for you, what did it feel like, or how did you have that discernment that Guatemala wasn't the right opportunity and you should keep looking into other things? Like, what was it about that
Mhm.
that kind of helped you know that?
Yeah, so I actually had a friend who did Guatemala. Like she went to Guatemala on the trip the year before. And so when I had said, this is something that I'm looking into, I want to hear what your experience was on it. And so she kind of walked me through her experience and what she did, and she really loved it. And it all sounded great, but it just didn't feel right to me. And
Hmm.
so processing that and being in prayer about that, um, and realizing that maybe there's something else out there for me. And then when I had the opportunity to interview the Teach Beyond member, I was like, maybe this is it. And
Hmm.
so just continuously walking through those doors was really reassuring for me. So
Yeah. Sounds like there's a combination of information
mhm.
gathering and learning, as well as prayerfulness and being aware of, okay, this just isn't, I don't have a settledness about this, or I do feel a peace about this. It's hard to quantify or identify exactly what's going on there, right? But I love that you had conversations with people to be able to learn more and have details and information to go along with your discernment process. That's helpful.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've been involved in church for much longer than that. So if we rewind all the way back to growing up and your background experiences, how has being involved in a local church fostered your desire to learn more about missions and kind of lean into what would it look like for me to be involved in missions?
Yeah, so I've been a part of the same church my entire life. And my church has always been very mission minded, largely due to my pastor's heart for missions and those who haven't heard the gospel yet. So in his messages, he continuously emphasizes our role as the church to support missions in order to further the spread of the gospel message in the world around us. And so he would always talk about, whether you're the missionary that's being sent or if you're the sender offering your support, um, those roles are all needed. And so I guess that was a big part for how I kind of viewed missions. And then with that, we always had a lot of missionaries come and just speak at my church about how the Lord was moving in their ministry and in their lives. And I just always remember being so intrigued by it and just being so fascinated in hearing their stories as well as their cross cultural experiences, which is a big thing for me. I find cultures fascinating. So just hearing all about those things, I just, yeah, was very fascinated by them, I guess. Um, and then I also had some opportunities to go on mission trips with my church. So one of them I went to Kansas City, Missouri, and then the other I went to Albania. And so I just found such joy in serving and meeting the needs of others alongside with my church family.
I'm curious how, if at all, how has your perspective on missions or on what a missionary is and does changed or grown in the process of interning with Teach Beyond and getting to know the ministry of Teach Beyond more? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I would say I've learned a lot more about the role of support staff. Um, you hear a lot about missionaries, and they're the ones who are going out on the mission field and serving. But there's so much that happens behind the scenes, um, and those people are still considered missionaries as well. So I would say that was a big part for me in learning that, because a lot of what I was doing with my internship wasn't necessarily, going out and like ministering to those people, but being that support staff is really important in serving missionaries and fulfilling God's mission.
Yeah, yeah. What a good point. Well, I'm going to ask you a little bit more about the details of your internship in a minute. And I imagine we'll get into, as we look at that day to day, just that missions can look like a lot of different things and isn't necessarily some of the more commonly shared stories. It's not always like that. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on that. But thinking more about how you have approached coming to this internship, what as you reflected on your gifts and how God's wired you, how do you see that playing into missions, or even how did you envision that playing into your internship with Teach Beyond?
Yeah, I would say through my compassion. I've
Mm,
always been told that I'm a very compassionate person, and I always have a heart for people who may have less than I do, and for those who don't know the joy of the Lord. So I definitely saw that in my internship and how I was able to interact with others. And then I also have taken a lot of like personality tests at my school,
hmm.
um,
I
and
know we
learning
had
like
fun talking about that during your
it's so fun. I just
internship. We
I
could have
love
kept going on that for a long time.
it. Yeah. And I realized that one of my biggest motivators is meeting the needs of people,
Hmm.
which is something that I'm able to live out in numerous aspects of my life, including in missions, in my internship, things like that. And then I also just really love connecting with people and listening to their unique stories that
Hmm.
encompass both their personal and their cultural identities. And so I believe the Lord has wired me to embrace the beauty of culture and diversity, which is helpful in how I'm able to relate to others and in turn share the love of Christ.
I just picture how you approach a conversation with a person and enter into a situation as a listener, as a learner, as that compassionate presence that you're talking about. And, on the one hand, it can be overwhelming to think about how many different applications that can have, right? That's not an obvious, okay, I have the gift of teaching and I'm going to be in a classroom and I know exactly what I want to do. It's a little bit broader than that. So it could lead to, wow, there's so many possibilities. And on the other hand, the reality is that's great to know that that's how you are going to show up in a variety of different contexts and wherever the Lord directs you, post university and beyond, that He will continue to grow those gifts in you. But that's such an important gift in all kinds of contexts to be able to be that, the listener, the bridge builder,
Mhm.
the connector within cultures. So that's great to know that about yourself and be able to continue to grow in that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to hear more about the day to day of your internship. And you know that I know some of that because we work together a little bit, but I'd love to have a picture of a little bit more about what this looked like. And I know it got off, on a very interesting start, even from the airport when you were leaving. You have to tell a little bit about that story, Chloe.
Because I had two parts of my trip. Part of it was in the UK in the global office, and then the other part was in Wheaton, Illinois for orientation. I had to book two separate round trip flights. And so with that, there was a whole issue with my bag, trying to get it through baggage claim, recheck it, all sorts of things. And basically, I was not able to bring my checked bag to the UK with me. So that was definitely a challenge. I lived off of my carry-on and my backpack, stuffed as much as I could in there.
Yes.
And most of what fit was not my sweaters and things like that. And it was much colder in the UK than I thought it was going to be. So I ended up
Yeah.
having to borrow clothes from some very generous and kind people. And yeah, it was very
Yeah.
interesting, very stressful in the moment, but now I can laugh about it and
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, man, I think we all have those stories where there's something that in the moment is very stressful and then
Yes.
later is a great story that you can tell a number of times. But talk about, just really quickly assimilating into the global office team by borrowing clothes. That was a conversation starter and a relationship builder there.
100%.
Oh,
Yeah, no,
man.
they were all so shocked. They were like, "Wow, you really went through that?" And I was like, "Yeah." It
And I'm
was,
here and I'm ready to go.
yeah, you gotta
So
be flexible.
that's right. Yeah. So let's talk first about what you did day to day in the global office, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you did at our orientation, our pre-field orientation for new missionaries. So, what did that look like day to day in the office in the UK?
Yeah, so each day looked a little different, but most days I would go to the office. Sometimes I would get a pastry from the local bakery, and then I had various things that I worked on while in the office. So working on logistics, I attended a lot of meetings, those kinds of things. And then one of the things I thought was really interesting, we all ate lunch together as a global office team. So I would literally just walk out the door and go get some food um, right across the street, which was very weird for me because I'm from the suburbs of the Twin Cities. So you drive everywhere. So for me to just literally walk across the street, get some food, that was definitely interesting. Um, but yeah, so we would all sit together, eat lunch, and then I would go home and eat dinner with my housemates while watching some British game shows that I couldn't quite get the hang of.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
so that was interesting.
Speaking of, cultural adjustment, you don't think when there's, English in common that there's going to be differences in TV.
hmm Yeah, I was so confident in some of the questions that were asked on the game show, and then I would get like part of it right, or it'd be like a like a word play kind of thing,
Uh-huh.
um, and they would use the British word for it, so then I couldn't
Sure.
figure it out at all, which
Right.
is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so spending time with them, um, things like that. But then if I focus more on like what I did in the office, one of the things that I really wanted to learn for my internship is how a global nonprofit like TeachBeyond functions, and all that goes into being able to actively live out its mission. So some of the things I did was attending numerous meetings. Some of them were one-on-ones, while others I was largely just observing what was happening. But in those one-on-ones, I really got to ask questions and learn about people's different roles, as well as I got to meet with a lot of people to talk about some of Teach Beyond's projects, such as the Sparrow Project, Open Schools Worldwide, and Beyond Borders. Um, and then I also was able to uh, attend like logistical meetings for orientation. So seeing kind of what are some things that have to go into putting on like a big event like orientation. And then I was also able to attend some meetings where they were exploring like new ideas, kind of weighing, is this something that we can do? Is this something that's feasible? So it's interesting to see those conversations that happen when you're kind of trying to figure those things out. I was tasked with analyzing some data, so that included putting the data into graphs and then just making it easier to see what are some things that we could improve on, what are some things that went really well with this.
And that was great because I actually was in a meeting just last week or so where we were talking about those graphs and able to use those for the next phase of the
That's
project.
awesome.
So, yeah, you never know. It's your work is going to keep popping up.
One of my biggest things that I did was helping with food logistics for the orientation. This consisted of continuously updating spreadsheets, getting numbers for how many people we were serving, updating arrival and departure information, emailing people about special diets, placing food orders, etc. And then another big thing I did was I met with Teach Beyond members from the UK office, and I was actually able to help them with marketing and advertising for their Walk Across the Bay event. And so for this, I designed their flyer, their social media posts, and then even the T-shirt that they wore at the event that day. So that was a really cool experience. But yeah, and then another really cool thing I did was I was able to work the Teach Beyond UK booth at the Big Church Festival in the UK, which is like this big festival where Christian artists come and sing. And they had this tent for like a bunch of nonprofits to share what they're doing in the world. And so I was able to share TeachBeyond's mission and vision for the world with people, and then also talk with other nonprofits, build connections, which who knows may develop into partnerships later on down the road. Um, so that was a lot of what I did in the UK. It was very cool. So
Yeah, a little bit of everything for
yeah.
sure. I love that you entered into that time asking the question, how does a nonprofit carry out its mission? It's not just how does it function, who does what, or, what details need to be attended to, even though your day to day was a lot of spreadsheets
Mhm.
and calls and meetings and things like that. All of that has to be towards a greater end, right? To advance the mission, to be a part of the bigger picture. And that perspective is so helpful and so important. And so that's great perspective to come in. All right, so while you were in the UK, you mentioned you were already starting to work on some of the logistics and details for that second half of your internship when you were back in the US but still in a different location at our pre-field orientation. And this is an event that I get to lead, and you're so good at jumping in and helping out. And you mentioned that's one of your gifts, and I definitely saw that week. So the goal of that week is to serve and prepare for those new missionaries to be going through their training week. So yeah, tell us what it looked like for you to be involved, and I'd love to hear your perspective on that week. What did it look like to be part of orientation?
Yeah, so at orientation, I continued in helping with food logistics. This even included going to Costco a couple of times, which was
Hmm.
definitely an experience. I had to push this huge flatbed um, full of snacks that I could barely see over.
Probably more snacks by one time than you had ever experienced
Oh,
before, right?
100%. It was crazy. I definitely left an impression on some of the Costco workers because I had to come back a second time that day, and they
That's
remembered
funny.
me
That's
struggling to
funny.
like push this cart. But so that was one of the things I did was going around getting food for the snack bags and things like that. But I also helped in setting up for some of the bigger meals that we had. So this was like the first night there. And then also there was the Chick-fil-A night at the park, and then the commissioning service. So seeing kind of like all the things that have to go into putting together, again, those like bigger events was definitely very interesting and a very great experience for me. But yeah, I helped in delegating different tasks to other Teach Beyond members. So that was interesting as an intern to kind of be like, okay, you do this,
Yeah.
and then one of my favorite memories at orientation was actually serving iced coffee with you.
I was
Um,
hoping you would bring this up. It was my favorite too.
it was so much fun. Yeah, we would serve iced coffee to some of the Teach Beyond members, and yeah, I enjoyed doing that. So,
Yeah, it was the staff who had been working kind of one meeting after another
mhm.
to meet individually with all of our new missionaries. And so we were trying to make sure that they were caffeinated and good to go for the afternoon. But what really stood out to me about that, Chloe, was that we were all having fun. The people who were serving, right? Like
Mhm.
we were all enjoying that process. And I think that is part of the joy of serving, when you can have fun in the process and know that it's such a small detail. It's just iced coffee, but you're able to meet a need and enjoy the process. That's definitely a highlight for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. Um, but then another thing I was able to do at orientation was attending some of the sessions, which I really enjoyed. Just hearing more about the amazing support that Teach Beyond offers its members, helping them to kind of enter into a culture that's different than their own. So providing them with resources. Um, that was something that I really appreciated, especially as an intercultural studies major, because it's something that really does need to be talked about. Is the cultural differences that you're going to experience, and how you can work through those, and learn to appreciate them as well. So um, but then I also got to spend some time with the third culture kid teens, which was also really cool. Just being able to learn about some of the challenges they may face as they experience some big changes in their life. and then being able to support them as they learn about those things. So,
Our weekly spotlight this week is internship opportunities. If you're looking to serve short term to learn about education as missions, visit teachbeyond.org/intern or click on the link in the show notes. And now back to the conversation with Chloe.
Well, Chloe, looking back on both parts of that internship over the whole time, it's been a few months since then. But what would you say you learned from your time interning with Teach Beyond?
yeah, I would say one of the biggest things I learned was the importance of community and supporting each other. I think of how every day in the office we would just sit around, eat lunch together, and just share life. And then at the end, we would pray for one another, share prayer requests, and then also pray for Teach Beyond. And so that was just really refreshing for me to see is that prayer aspect of it and how everyone's coming together and just supporting one another. One of the things I also thought was really cool was I witnessed a practical approach to being able to contextualize the gospel message in a way that's understandable cross culturally while still valuing that person's cultural identity. So I think Teach Beyond does a really great job at this in providing resources such as training or curriculum, while also giving its members the freedom to make changes based on the cultural context they're in, which is something that I learned from my one-on-one meetings with people. I thought that was really, really cool. And then also just navigating cultural differences. I learned how important it is to be clear in expectations, since there may be differences there. So managing those can be a way to potentially help mitigate unnecessary conflict. So finding commonalities, embracing those differences, and then also just showing genuine care.
You're talking about that multicultural teams aspect, and I'm wondering from your own experiences cross culturally or from those conversations, what did you learn about living cross culturally?
Yeah. While I think I knew this before, it became very apparent to me that I don't know everything, and that I should always be willing and open to learning and listening from others.
Hmm.
So just displaying humility and being willing to ask questions can really lead to beautiful relationships.
Hmm.
And so I was really blessed to have my housemates in the UK to ask those questions,
Yeah.
and then in turn be able to share what life is like for me in the US. But even something as simple as language was really interesting in the UK. So even though we speak English,
Right.
there's going to be differences there. So trying to navigate those and figure out, okay, this word means this here, was sometimes a challenge, or just caught me off guard.
Right.
Like, for example, the first time I was asked if I was in the queue in the grocery store was such an interesting experience. Like, to me, it's a line, but
Right.
it made sense. It caught me off guard. And then also just living in a physical environment that's different than my own was definitely challenging at times. I consider myself to be directionally challenged. So navigating where I was going was definitely difficult sometimes. I did get lost a couple of times. Um, just going to the grocery store, even, which I'd been to a couple of times, I still managed to get lost.
uh,
So using Google Maps was helpful in
that's
that.
good.
But those are some of my challenges living cross culturally, but also some of my biggest takeaways.
Hmm. Well, besides the cultural aspect, what would you say surprised you most during your time?
Yeah, I would say how multifaceted and diverse Teach Beyond is.
Hmm.
Going into this, I knew that Teach Beyond was um, an educational missions organization, but I didn't really know much more than that. Um, but it was explained a lot of times to me as a great example of the story of the blind men and the elephant. So in this story, each of the men touched the elephant, and they end up drawing different conclusions about what they think it is. And so, in the same way, when you ask lots of different Teach Beyond members about what Teach Beyond is, they're likely going to give you many different answers. And so, through my internship, I was able to get a glimpse of a variety of those different descriptions, and seeing the different parts that makes up Teach Beyond. Um, and I just realized how much goes into a nonprofit organization and how important each part is in fulfilling and carrying out the mission and vision.
Yeah, that's great that you're able to just get a little bit more of a picture of what Teach Beyond does. I know this is one of the points that is always difficult to introduce someone new to because there's just so many different aspects to what Teach Beyond looks like around the world. But that's one of the things I love most about Teach Beyond, that there's so many
Mm-hmm.
different expressions and seeking to be contextual, as you were saying before. So that's great that you got a taste of that during your
Yeah,
time.
it's just so many opportunities. And one of the things that I appreciated a lot about Teach Beyond was how open Teach Beyond is to trying new ideas and being willing to seeing how those go and how it
Mm.
aligns with their mission.
Well, looking back on all those weeks of your internship, what would you say is an experience that stood out to you from all of that? It's hard to narrow it down, but what stood out to you
Yeah.
besides our iced coffee adventure?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Um, One of my biggest takeaways or moments that stood out as impactful to me was that I was able to attend many of the testimony nights at orientation, which is where the Teach Beyond candidates they shared their testimonies and how the Lord called them into missions. So just hearing each of their stories and how the Lord uniquely shaped them and prepared the way for them was incredibly powerful to hear. Um, and it was here that I came to realize that the Lord doesn't necessarily call the equipped, but rather He equips the called. That was one of my biggest takeaways from my internship with Teach Beyond, was that I may not necessarily feel like I can do this on my own, but knowing that I don't have to do it on my own and that the Lord has prepared the way and He has prepared me and
Hmm.
equipped me with all that I need to be able to do that. That was just so encouraging to hear.
That's great. Well, Chloe, it's great to look back and have kind of the bigger picture perspective on how God was at work through all those little things that you were doing. They weren't little; they all added up to having a big impact. So, what advice do you have for maybe another college student like you, another university student who might be considering interning it in a missions organization like Teach Beyond? What would you say to them?
I would say pursue whatever you feel the Lord is placing on your heart, and continue to walk through those doors that the Lord has opened for you, and just trust that His plan is great and that it's greater than you'll ever understand for yourself. And I think it can be so easy to kind of want to stay in your own comfort zone and not really branch out much. But I think it's in those moments when we're out of our comfort zone that we experience the most growth. I think we can learn a lot about ourselves when we are challenged, and those things that you learn about yourself will be greater in the future. So I also think that interning in missions specifically can expand your perspective and can really open you up to more worldviews, and then also just being a part of something bigger than myself and knowing that the Lord can use me to help transform lives and communities
Hmm.
around the world is just such an exciting thing. So.
Hmm. Yeah. Chloe, what excites you about thinking about this next generation, Gen Z, joining in with global missions and seeing your peers, your friends, your classmates, kind of graduating and entering into this next phase of life. You're getting close to graduation. You're not quite there yet, but getting close. What excites you as you think about your generation being part of missions?
Oh, that's such a good question. I would say so with such globalization that takes place in the world today. I think my generation has a great access to understanding and wanting to learn more about people who are different than ourselves. Um, and I think that's something that we can really bring to the mission field is wanting to embrace those differences and those similarities and find bridges um, to be able to connect with people um, and show them that they matter, um, and not coming in here and being like our way is the right way, but realizing that different isn't necessarily bad, but there can be a lot of good that can come from that. um, so yeah, I think yeah, just building connections with others and seeing them for who they are, and their own unique identity.
That's, as you mentioned, the crossing cultures and needing to be aware of how we enter a new culture. That's such a great perspective that you bring in entering that type of environment. I love what you're sharing, that we would come in as bridge builders, and so that's great. Well, Chloe, every week on the show, we ask our guests one final question. So here's the big question. What is changing your life this week? This can be big or small, anything in between. And I'll go first and then give you a chance to think about your answer, and then we'll hear from you. So, what's changing my life this week? This is a little bit smaller of a thing. I'm not sure if you've used this before or if I'm even showing my age by saying that I'm using this. Okay. But I just discovered stickers on iMessage and WhatsApp. And so it's like taking a photo that you have, and you like kind of drag the person in it out of the photo and you can
Yes.
turn it into a sticker. And even a live photo can be like a moving sticker. It's just the best, and I have 2 adorable nephews who I'm loving capturing in stickers and, like, sending them in iMessage. So, that is what's changing my life lately. You have
I
to tell
love
me, are you a sticker lover too?
I haven't really used them much, but maybe
Okay.
I'll have to start using them.
Alright, great. We'll have this on record that I'm influencing you in this.
Yes.
Oh, good. Well, what's changing your life lately?
Okay, so over Christmas break, I was able to meet up with some family and friends, which it was very energizing and just much needed to take some time and just talk with them. And then I was also able to catch up with a friend from high school.
Mm,
So just revisiting old memories, and then just
yeah.
sharing what's new in our lives right now. And so that's what I would say is changing my life this week.
Yes, that's what the holidays are for, that time for family and friends. So I'm glad you're able to do that during the holiday break. Well, that's great, Chloe. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. It's been great to hear about your experience and what great advice for those who might be considering what's next, whether a missions internship is part of their university experience and helping them get their feet wet in what it could look like to be part of a global missions organization like TeachBeyond. So thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Kian and I serve with an organization called TeachBeyond. As you have heard, education plays a big role in missions, and TeachBeyond is a part of that.
As followers of Jesus, TeachBeyond is a global community providing transformational education services as part of God's ongoing mission to transform individuals and communities into all He intends.
Want to learn more and get involved? Visit teachbeyond.org or follow us on social media.
To help more people find the podcast and hear about TeachBeyond, we'd love it if you would leave a rating or review and share the show with a friend. Be sure you subscribe or following the show on the platform where you listen so you never miss an episode.
And as always, you can reach us at podcast@teachbeyond.org. We'll see you next week.